Today, I take the digital out of digital while trying to enjoy digital. So I was not looking forward to sharing my thoughts with you on these two items. The Telegartner M12 Premium, which is the new updated version from their very famous M12 Gold, and also their optical bridge. And here's the reason why. It's not that I wasn't impressed by it. It's that I found it really difficult to take notes and to listen critically and to then try and explain what I was hearing and frankly not hearing, because all I wanted to do was put the pen and my notepad down and just listen to music on this. And I will tell you that of all the gear I've had and that I've listened to, I find myself often jumping from song to song to song. I'm only listening to a minute or two of a song, trying to listen to a certain spot. But rarely do I get to a point where I just want to listen to a complete song. I just want to enjoy it because I'm taken in by it. And that's exactly what happened with these two items. First thing I did, I received it. I let it burn in for 150 hours. And that was about 7 or 8 days. But also I wanted it to settle. Typically digital gear, whether it be switches or things of that nature, they like to settle for a while from the shipping and all the jostling. In fact, if you move the stuff around, you'll want to let it sit for a while, let it kind of resettle. On my Paul Pang quad switch, which I've been running up till now, the manufacturer actually states in talking with him that he wanted it to have 3 to 4 weeks for it to settle after shipping for everything to calm down. I was not sure if I believed that or not on gear until when I was doing the review on the Zenwave speaker cables. I actually was switching back and forth between them and the other cables that I had, the FuroTech. And when I plugged the Zenwave back in, I immediately noticed that it had taken a big step back in sound that I knew wasn't right. So I said, So I let it sit overnight, let it settle, and I went back the next day, and sure enough, the sound was back. So I've experienced it. But what I did on this one is I let it burn in, and then I wanted to approach this in a systematic, notice I don't say scientific, there's nothing scientific about what I do, but a systematic and somewhat controlled way in which I listen to this. So I have become very familiar with my system with the Paul Pang quad switch, and then also mixing 1 and 2 Reversa filters between the Paul Pang and my current Rode streamer. And I do have a review coming up on those. Those are really, really, really good products. And they really took my sound to a very nice level. On the M12 Premium, the first thing I did was take out the filters, and I compared the Paul Pang switch going directly into the rows. And I used, because I did receive also the Telegartner cables, so I wanted to keep things consistent. I became familiar with the sound going out of the Paul Pang quad switch into my rows using the Telegartner cable. Then what I did is I replaced that with the M12 Gold, that's a previous version, M12 Premium switch. And I went back and forth and back and forth. And to be honest with you, I wasn't sure I heard anything at first. I was looking for tonal shifts. I was looking for difference in air and openness, and there wasn't much difference. So I said, okay, well, clearly I need to, either there's no difference or I need to reassess how I'm approaching this. So I took a break from it and I came back the next day. And what I noticed was, first and foremost, there definitely was, and I noticed this from minute one, a stronger, more defined bass with the M12 Premium. Not to say it was ever lacking on the Paul Pang, it wasn't, but it was a little bit stronger foundation there with the M12. But then I started noticing, I started noticing stuff that wasn't there, but that was there that made a difference. So for instance, typically when I've changed cables or gear, I notice there's more or less air around stuff. What I noticed with the M12 is that there wasn't necessarily any more air over the Paul Pang, but the air sounded more natural, more realistic. Let me give you a perfect example. As many of you know, one of my reference songs is Above and Beyond, the Counting Down the Days / Liquid Love, the live version from the Hollywood Bowl. And as I've said on other videos, there is a video version of that, and then there's the streaming version of it, audio only. I strongly recommend that you watch the video version, because the video version is going to show you all the different instruments and where they're placed and how they're playing it. This is a very chameleon-like recording, where initially I thought it was a terrible recording, but as my system has improved, I've heard more and more and more has been revealed to me that is in line with the video. And the video allows you to know what's there versus what you're missing in your audio only. So I love this track. As you get into a better system, you realize, frankly, it's very well recorded. I noticed that the audience with the Paul Pang. Now, keep in mind, the Paul Pang switch is $2,300 for the switch, I believe. And you have the audience in front of you, and then you have the live stage. With the Paul Pang, the audience was there. You could hear it, no problem. But with the M12, the audience was still there, but I was hearing more subtlety in the audience. I was hearing individual voices more. It sounded more tonally rich. It was more engaging and just more natural and lifelike than with the Paul Pang. Now, keep in mind, at this point, we're at such a high level that these are not major differences, but when you're familiar with the music and you realize what the differences are, you can hear them. So what I mean by that is, when I started noticing that, or when I started playing on the song, there's a part where they have 2 or 3 different types of drums playing at the same time. Whereas I could always hear that with the Paul Pang. With the M12, not only could I hear those drums very clearly, I could hear the individual hits more clearly. It sounded less like they were grouped together, and they sounded more individual and distinct on the drums. That, to me, made the rhythm, I don't want to say faster, but a clearer rhythm. The ebb and flow became more obvious for me. There's also a part where when they have the violins playing, I used to think that, it was a long in, long out, my very technical musical terms on the violin. But what I realized on the M12 is that wasn't the case. They were actually going very quickly back and forth, that on a different switch, I don't want to say lesser, but on a different switch, it sounded like one long stroke, but on the M12, you could hear that it wasn't. You could pick up those differences. So what I'm trying to say is, although the differences were subtle, they weren't. Because once you heard them and once you understood what you were hearing, if you then took the M12 out, it seemed like a much bigger loss than when you initially put it in, if that makes sense. So I was really pleased with that and thinking, wow, okay, that's a good step forward. I'm trying to think, Holly Cole, on her song, on the Holly Cole song, Every Day Will Be Like a Holiday, it was not more air. I could always hear good acoustics into the room, but she was very much more clearly right there in the room, not in the sense of sound staging, not in the sense of I was hearing things I had never heard before, because everything I had heard before was still there. But it just sounded more natural and better tonality and texture, even of the existing air and surroundings and harmonics and things of that nature. Her piano sounded a little bit tonally richer. So it really was a nice change that when you're getting to this level, especially when you get into higher resolution systems, makes a bigger difference. Then I took a step back and I added in the optical bridge. So then I decided to add the optical bridge. So I came 5 meters out of the wall into then the Telegartner switch, out of the Telegartner switch into one side of the optical bridge, out of the optical bridge, right into the back of the rows. And this was really interesting for me. I noticed that, and full disclosure, halfway through listening with the optical bridge, I received my new Siltech speaker cables, the 680s, beautiful cables. And they allowed me to hear everything I heard on the Zenwave cables through the first half of the listening. They allowed it to come out in even more spades. So I want to be clear and let you know that everything I'm describing to you, I heard without the Siltech, but when I added the Siltech cables in, it was more of the goodness without any negatives. I was really kind of astonished at the optical bridge. And let me tell you why. If you've watched my other videos, you know that coming out of the wall, I did 3 or 4 videos. I tested, I think it was over 15 different switches, a combination, well over 100 different combinations of the number of switches and the type of switches. And we decided on 3 switches, 3 different types of switches that when played in a certain order at the beginning of the system before the 5-meter run really cleaned up the sound, really made a difference. Whether I was using a gigafoil, whether I was using the reversa stuff, whether I was going straight into the Paul Pang, however it was. So for only a little bit of money, that made a big difference. And I added a power conditioner to those on that wall side, and that made a difference. So I've already got quite a bit of cleaning up, for lack of a better word, of the cable and of interference before it hits the switch. And then I figured the switch would clean up whatever was left. So I didn't really expect much from the optical bridge. Guys, the optical bridge was really, really impressive. I noticed now when I was playing go back to the Above and Beyond, the horns that before would, I don't want to say almost made me wince a little bit because I like to listen at higher volumes. Yeah. That was all gone. That shoutiness of the horns and the brass was gone. I was like, wow. Female voices, whether it be on vocal trance, where this is often a problem, or even the Holly Cole when she was singing, I've always had this little bit of digital hashiness that comes across as sibilance, comes across as a little bit of high frequency sloppiness on female voices and some instruments. Cymbals, specifically triangles, that was cleaned up. It wasn't there. I was like, wow, this was a really noticeable difference. To me, the music had more swagger, frankly. It had more ebb and flow. And I think the way that came across was that because it was cleaning up the micro details and things that affect that increased the sense of an ebb and flow, because what were previously slight differences and nuances that had been lost in the digital noise and the hashiness, for lack of a better technical term, was cleaned up by the optical bridge. I noticed that, so then I decided to try feet. And in talking with Telegartner, they told me that they really spent a lot of time on this M12 Premium, focusing on things such as vibration. And I've got a lot of videos coming up on vibration. You saw me interview Arthur from Revopods. We've tried the isoacoustics feet. We've tried I think we're up to 5 or 6 different feet that we've tried now. And up till now, the Revopods are by far the best. Not even close. It's a whole nother level. So I tried the Revopods under the switch and I really didn't notice that much of a difference. So to me, that shows they really did focus on vibration control, because when I put the Revopods under my Paul Pang switch, it was a massive, massive sonic difference. I mean, it wasn't even close. I was blown away by it. So I know the M12, the Revopods work. So then I decided to take the Revopods and put them under the optical bridge. And that's where I really noticed a difference. For me, whereas before, here's a lens. I'm gonna give this example again. What it does is it's almost like when you put the Revopods under it, it just goes a little bit more in focus. There's a little bit less messiness on high frequencies, on cymbals, on triangles. There is more micro detail that comes out of what is already there, and a little bit more tone and texture. So the bridge itself added a noticeable amount of tone and texture. Now, if we go back to the drums that I was talking about on Above and Beyond, where I could now hear the individual strikes on the M12, now I was actually hearing the tonal differences, which I had never been able to ascertain before and decipher before. So I knew which drum was being hit. It was quite impressive. That to me was really the system firing on all cylinders, because the only way I can describe it is that it was the most undigital digital music I'd ever heard up till now in my system. I did try the isoacoustics under the feet on the Telegartner optical bridge. That was a step backwards in sound. I've not had good luck in my system. I'm sure part of it may be just the type of wood that's on my rack or whatever it is. I know a lot of people like them. That's fine. Just didn't work to my personal taste in my system on this gear. The RevoPods are really where it's at. So I ended up with the RevoPods under the optical bridge, the M12 with nothing under it, running their cables, and finishing up with the Siltech 680 speaker cables. I can't remember the last time I just wanted to sit back on the couch and just listen to music, listen to the full songs, just enjoy them and just have a smile on my face. This really was the most musical experience I've had up till now with my current system or in the past, in a way that really made me just want to listen to music. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you this is the best. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that there's nothing better. There's a lot of stuff I haven't heard. I am going to tell you that in my system, I don't know how I'm going to go back to not having the Telegartner M12 switch and the optical bridge in my system, because once you hear what it can sound like, when you take it out, you can't unhear it. It just, everything sounds broken in comparison. So definitely a huge win. Top-notch products. I know that whereas people, again, had reported in the past that the M12 switch needs some real vibration help, I don't see that in this newest version. In my room, on my system, you may feel otherwise. But really, I guess the best way for me to describe is, it's funny. For those of you who watch, what is it, the Great Baking Show or whatever on BBC or whatever it is, the big thing that everybody wants is they want a handshake from Paul Hollywood, the chef, celebrity chef judge. That means, wow, this is really impressive. So I've come into this thinking, what can I do to convey how much I love this Telegartner gear in my system? And this was the best compliment I could come up with. It's bravo. Telegartner, bravo. You are clearly very focused on this. You clearly understand what goes into making beautiful sound. And I want to thank you for letting me hear how good it can sound, because I finally feel like I'm reaching a point, and I'm sure there's still more to go on this journey. I'm starting to finally realize and feel with the Telegartner in my system that I'm now taking the digital out of the digital sound. This is the most organic, analog-like, with the touch of humanity sound I've yet heard from my system. Guys, see you on the next one.